the cost of losing an A player, the cost of replacing an A player is huge. And maybe this doesn't get thought about. Gallup came out and said the cost of replacing an individual employee can range from 1.5 to 2 times the employee's annual salary. So if you have a hygienist making $75,000 a year, Gallup's analysis says that it costs you between $100,000 and $150,000 to replace an A player hygienist. Now, I know right now some of you are just shaking your head. You're going, Colin, you've really lost your mind here on this one. Let me talk you through this. Let me see if this makes any sense. This is Gallup's data. And let's analyze a hygienist. So let's analyze what it looks like. Well, if you lose an A player hygienist, you're going to have the loss of availability in your schedule. You're going to have to cancel hygiene until you replace her. You're going to have if you put a temp in the hygiene seat, if you can find one, she's not going to be an A player because there's no temps that are A players. That's why they're temps, right? Because they aren't keeping a job somewhere. So if they are producing, they're going to produce at half of what your A player did or a quarter of what your A player did. You're going to have the loss of your time because you are the one that's got to go interview and hire these people. Then you're going to have, let's say you hire the wrong person, right? Let's say you hire somebody and you fire them 8 weeks later because they didn't work out. Then you have the cost of that bad hire, but then you have to go into a subsequent hiring cycle. So let's calculate this a little bit. If it takes you 4 weeks to hire a hygienist, that hygienist then gives 2 weeks notice. They start in your office, and it takes you 4 to 6 weeks to really ramp up and evaluate how they're performing, what they're doing. Let's say your hygienists are producing $2,000 a day. You can do if your hygienist only produces $1,000 a day, or they're producing $3,000 a day, you can substitute in your own math here, right? I'm not stuck on these numbers. I'm illustrating a real example of how I showed a doctor what it cost him to replace his hygienist, right? So he was out for 10 weeks while he was hiring and giving his new hygienist was giving notice. And then during the ramp up period, she was not operating at 100%. So he lost $80,000 over 3 months in production from this hygienist. Plus, the doctor spent 20 hours or so hiring, and he said his hourly rate was $800 an hour. There's another $16,000. Now, this particular doctor went on to hire a hygienist who didn't work out. He hired a B player. She had cultural issues. She wasn't the right fit. He said she was lazy. I don't know. I didn't ask him more questions. He said he fired her, right? I took him at his word. So now you have this wrong hire that for the ramp up period, she's only producing $1,000 a day. So in reality, you lost $32,000 because you only got half of the collections out of the bad hygienist, right? And then he had to go through another round of hiring, which means he had another 8 to 10 weeks of 4 weeks hiring, 2 weeks of giving notice, and I think he said 3 to 4 weeks. He found an A player his second round of getting them ramped up and onboarded and all the kinks worked out and the scheduling blocks and all that good stuff. And that cost him another almost $100,000. And these numbers slip through our fingers because we're not having to sign the check. I've said many times, if everybody in America had to send in a quarterly tax payment and they had to sign their own quarterly tax payment to Uncle Sam, we'd live in a radically different society. But instead, we have this thing called withholding, and money just slips through people's fingers. And that's kind of the same thing that's happening here. You're not having to write a check for $224,000. You just never made the money. It was just bad months of production, and the top line just disappeared. So in reality, Gallup said 1.5 to 2 times is the cost of replacing. If this hygienist is making $75,000, it just costs you 3 times the cost of their annual salary in loss of top line revenue. and I think this is a realistic example of what bad people, the wrong, not bad people, bad word, the wrong people in your practice and what can happen. They're not bad people. They're just not the right fit. They're the wrong fit in your practice. They're probably the right fit in somebody else's practice. And we talked about this a lot with recruiting. Everybody's a great fit somewhere, right? They may just want to be in a maintainer office. They may not want to be in a fast growth office. And those are very different A players that each is going to have. I've got right next to Dr. Ron is a real nice dentist that, I don't know, he was in his 70s. He just retired and his son took over. But up until he retired, he was kind of in a cruise control mode. And that's not right or wrong. It just is what it is. He wasn't looking for people that are wanting to change the system and grow and scale up. He was cruising. His son was coming on. Now his son's come in and has made a bunch of changes. And now he's looking for different people to lead that charge.